This is about defending democracy. This is no longer Democrats versus Republicans. What do you want your kids to believe in? There must be give and take.
This is White Flag with Joe Walsh.
Former Congressman Joe Walsh here. So there's a group I recently found and have become a really big fan of. Starts With Us. They're a movement working to overcome the extreme political and cultural division in America. You can find them online at startswith.us. I love them because they're showing people it's possible to have real, meaningful, productive conversations with people you disagree with. I'm a big fan of this. This is what I try to do on my podcast because right now in America, we have two major political parties that are at each other's throats. And the most dangerous aspect of this is that it's led many of us to avoid having hard conversations with people we disagree with. We're afraid to have these hard conversations, afraid to deal with the tough stuff, so we walk away. But to save our democracy, we have to stick around. I mean, if we all walk away from the table, then who the hell is sticking around to figure things out? This is what I so love and admire about the work that Starts With Us is doing. They're sticking around. They are the movement for people like you and me who want to fight the extreme political and cultural division in this country. Because guess what? People like us, we are in the majority. Starts With Us found that 87% of Americans are tired of how politically and culturally divided we are. So yeah, I'm not just a fan, I'm part of the movement too. And if you're listening to me right now, I want you to join the movement as well. Go to startswith.us and get their free newsletter. Sign up for their free newsletter. Get involved. Start there. Startswith.us. Thanks. I so appreciate courage, the virtue of courage. To me, and I'm not the first to say this, courage is the most important of all human virtues. It sustains and enables people to be virtuous because it takes courage to be virtuous. It takes courage to do the right thing. It takes courage to speak the truth, knowing you're going to get piled on. It takes courage to live a life adhering as best as one can to one's principles. It takes courage to go against the grain. It takes courage to do what you believe is the right thing to do when everybody else is doing something different. It takes courage to do what you believe is the right thing to do. It takes courage to do the right thing, knowing that doing the right thing will destroy your career. Courage. It takes courage to apologize. It takes courage to admit you were wrong. It takes courage to acknowledge that you've helped create the problem. It takes courage to apologize. It takes courage to change, to evolve. But to change, to have a position, to be presented with information, new truths that call you to question your belief your position and then compel you to say, you know what? I was wrong about climate change. I was wrong about this immigration policy. I was wrong about the dreamers. I was wrong about trying to ban this gun or that gun. I was wrong. It takes courage to change. I was wrong to behave the way I did. That takes courage. It's not a surprise, but there is a paucity of courage in my world of politics and media, but politics most especially, political media, but politics just most especially. We do not see a lot of courage in the political world. We see mostly politicians who say what needs to be said to get votes, to stay in power, to stay in front of the TV cameras, to get reelected. Generally, most political people, most politicians, Republican and Democrat, that's what they'll do. They'll do what they have to do to stay in power. I get that. I know that. It's an attractive thing to be a politician and to have some power. But to go against that, to be an elected official and to do something or say something that you know most people aren't going to like, but you believe is the right thing to do something or say something that you know is going to hurt you politically. Rare the politician on both sides of the aisle that does that. It takes courage to change. I so appreciate people who do this, who have the courage, wherever it comes from, to change, to be on the wrong road, a bad road, to see the damage that you're doing, the divisiveness that you're causing, and to get off that road. To do wrong, realize it, apologize for it, and then change and do right. I so appreciate people generally in life who are able to do this because it's not the norm. I so appreciate people in the political world who do this because it's most especially not the norm. One of the most vivid political examples in front of us is, the handful of Republicans during these Trump years. And again, the given is that pretty much every Republican during these Trump years believes and knows the same thing about Donald Trump, that he's an unfit, bad person, a criminal, a traitor, all the rest. Everybody says it. I know everybody says it. Privately, all Republicans believe this. The handful of Republicans over these years, these past 7 or 8 years, who've stood up in the public square and said that publicly. Donald Trump is unfit. Donald Trump is bad for this country. Donald Trump is anti-democracy. Donald Trump is a bad, pathological liar. He's a bad, horrible person. The Republicans, and there are so very few of us these past 7 or 8 years who've done that, knowing that it would destroy their career, it would end their livelihood, it would end any hope they had to be a viable Republican moving forward. Such great courage. You're going to hear here in a moment a conversation with a Canadian, a gentleman named Tony McAleer. Amazing man. At one time, was a leader of one of Canada's largest neo-Nazi organizations. He's a former white supremacist. He was a leader in the white supremacist movement. He was, and he's not now. He now is an amazing gentleman who travels the world, really, speaking and writing about his journey, helping other people who were where he was as a white supremacist get out of that world. He's written a book, an amazing book called The Cure for Hate, a white supremacist journey from violent extremism to radical compassion. He co-founded an organization called Life After Hate, an organization that helps people leave white supremacist movements and help them adjust to a life of love and unity as opposed to a life of hate. Courage is a big part of, and Tony talks to this, a big part of what we all need to do the right thing. Oh boy, did he display courage. Former white supremacist, recognizes the bad, horrible, evil road he's on, got off of that road, and now not only got off of that road, he's doing everything he can to get people off of that road and to make amends for that white supremacist road he was on by bringing people together and teaching people to have radical compassion for their fellow man. He's making amends for the life he lived, and then some. A sought-after speaker, Tony McAleer, and it's a fascinating conversation. And he was very open and honest, talking about how his past made him who he is today. He no longer judges himself for his past because he's trying to do good now. Tony McAleer and I talked about some of the keys in fighting polarization. Tony is another movement partner for a movement that I have joined as well called Starts With Us, a movement of people across the political spectrum who are trying to fight against the extreme cultural and political division in this country. Tony's a movement partner with Starts With Us. He and I had a really interesting conversation that I hope you will listen to right now about how we deal with this polarization that's eating at us as a people, what we can do about it, what it takes to defeat polarization. And I'll give you a hint, that word courage comes into play. Again, Joe Walsh, former congressman here. This is White Flag with Joe Walsh. Listen to this wherever you listen to your podcast. And listen right now. An amazing conversation, short, 10, 12, 13 minutes, 14 minutes, with an amazing individual, Tony McAleer, His book, The Cure for Hate, you ought to get your hands on. A white supremacist journey from violent extremism to radical compassion. Tony and I sat down for a few minutes to talk about his journey, what he's learned, and what we can do about polarization. I want to thank, again, Starts With Us for these conversations. And by the way, those of you who want to join the movement to do something about this extreme division and polarization in this country, really easy to do. Go to startswith.us, startswith.us. Sign up for their free newsletter. Become part of the movement. Join me and become part of the movement. Thanks. Congressman Joe Walsh with you, and this is a real treat to be with someone who I think is a real inspiration, Tony McAleer. He is a speaker and an author, an amazing guy. The book he wrote, The Cure for Hate, is sort of his memoir, a white supremacist journey from violent extremism to radical compassion. He's the co-founder of the organization Life After Hate, an organization that helps people leave white supremacist movements behind. And I'm excited about this. He's got a film out, a documentary out that's on the festival circuit right now, The Cure for Hate, Bearing Witness from Auschwitz. I want to ask him about. Tony, thank you for taking a couple minutes.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, just one quick, odd, weird question, because I go through this a little bit politically when I look at my past political life and some of the crazy stuff I said and did when I was really divisive. There are still times when I'll look back at footage of me as a congressman yelling and railing and screaming, and I'll go, what was I thinking? Are there still times like when you look back at your prior life and go, what the heck was I doing? Does that ever hit you?
It does. It does, definitely. And part of my journey out and away from that is with a great coach, mentor, counselor, Dov Barron. I did over 1,000 hours of one-on-one and group counseling to unravel why I chose the things I chose, and to understand the lens through which I made those decisions. But at the same time, I can judge the things I did, and I can judge the things I said. But I also, I don't judge me anymore. And
that's cool. It's a good way to put it.
A level of self-acceptance that, yes, I did those. I understand why I did those things. But those things are also make me who I am today, and allow me to have the platform to share the message about radical compassion.
I've read and I know and I've heard you say that becoming a dad was really kind of the turning point. What specifically, Tony, in that really transformed you?
When I held my daughter for the first time in that delivery room, and she was tiny, and I was afraid I'm going to do something wrong. I'm going to break her or something. And she opened her eyes for the first time since her open her eyes, and the first thing her brain took as a picture was my face. And I connected to another human being for the first time since I could remember when, because as I got so deeply immersed into this world of white supremacy and hate, I was completely disconnected from my humanity, from my feelings, from everything, and operating from ego and narcissism. But and I had a son 15 months later who I got to parent the way I always wanted to be parented. And it slowly allowed a thawing process to happen. But ultimately what my children gave me was compassion.
Yeah.
When we are compassionate with someone, we hold a mirror up and allow them to see their humanity reflected back at them when they can't see it themselves. And what I saw through the look on their eyes and their faces when they looked at me, and they saw this great, magnificent dad human being, I didn't see that when I looked in the mirror.
Yeah.
And they were safe to love. They were safe to love. I could allow my heart to open and to thaw, because at that age, when they're young, they're not capable of rejection. They're not capable of shaming. They're not capable of ridicule. That happens when they're like 13 and stuff.
Tony, you've been out speaking a lot. You work with folks all the time. You interact with people all the time. I've heard you use that word compassion a lot, and it's spot on. But it's hard for people to get there sometimes. Why is it so difficult for many of us to grasp on and to hang on to compassion?
Well, there's a couple of reasons for it. One is it's often perceived to be soft
Yeah.
or weak, right? And so it's people think if we're compassionate, we're going to get walked over. That's why compassion. And my mom taught me this lesson amazingly when I was a single father and needed her help. Her love for me was unconditional. Her relationship with me was very conditional. And so compassion, when combined with healthy boundaries and consequences, is a really powerful thing. And we can set boundaries and be compassionate. It puts us in a great place. Often people have trouble being compassionate with other human beings because they don't have compassion for themselves. The level to which we dehumanize other human beings is a mere reflection of our own internal disconnection and dehumanization. Yeah. And when we can develop compassion, and that's what my coach and mentor did in those 1,000 hours, is to have compassion for little Tony that made those choices. We can condemn and judge the actions. We can condemn and judge the words, but we don't judge the human being. And it's sort of learning to separate the two, but to develop that compassion for self. And the more I had compassion for myself, the more I could recognize the humanity and connect to the humanity in others, particularly those I dehumanized. And the more I could do that, the more I got my humanity reflected back at me. And it became this very positive feedback loop.
Tony, how common is it in your experience for people to make the transformation that you made?
It's definitely rare.
Yeah.
Most people don't even know that it's possible, or they wouldn't know where to begin.
Yeah.
And I like to say that, one of the things we did at Life After Hate is we kind of provided proof of concept. This, it doesn't require us as people who used to be in those movements to do it, but we showed that it can be done. And now, what we're seeing is a public health approach, a healing approach to helping people get out of, whether it's gangs or violent extremism.
Yeah.
And these different movements. So it is very possible, but it's sort of, it takes a paradigm shift in order to embrace and do that. And there's counselors, there's people embedded in the communities that have counseling training, but don't believe that they can do this work because they don't understand it. And so one of the things that we've done to make the whole process more scalable is to work on getting people training that have counseling experience and training to demystify it, so that they go, you know what, I can deal with this. And when you start to look at it that way, then there's a whole army of people in the community that have the skill set to make a difference.
You're a movement partner with Starts With Us. I'm involved with Starts With Us. I come, Tony, from the world of politics. And man, it's like we are just at each other's throats politically. The polarization's at a level I've never seen. Stupid, broad, general, vague question. What's the key to really beginning to attack this polarization that I think is really killing us?
Well, I think it really starts with us. And I think one of the things that we need to do as individuals is we have to check our addiction to outrage.
Well said. Well said.
I think we're addicted to outrage, and we will tune into places that give us that blast of outrage.
Yeah. That was, by the way, that was very well put. Our addiction to outrage.
Yeah. So we need to check that, and we need to wean ourselves off of that. And I found myself in different election cycles, getting sucked into watching, network news all the time. And then I started to pay attention, like how my body felt afterwards.
Yeah.
And I went like, this is not a good feeling in my body. This is toxic for my body.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be putting this in my body, and made a conscious decision to stay informed, but to wean myself off of that addictive and toxic cycle. I think the other thing that we need to do, and again, it starts with us, is we need to be conscious that as human beings, we have an incredible power to inspire others through our acts and through our deeds. So who we choose to be in every moment of every day gives permission to other people to act, and that can be for good, or it can be for bad. So it's when we check our own behavior and set the example. How do we inspire others to that place of compassion, acceptance, curiosity, and it takes some courage to do that, and that's why it starts with us. It always talks about the 3 C's: curiosity, courage, and compassion.
Well,
and I think if we embrace those into our, who and what we are every moment of every day, we can start to create those ripple effects and infect others.
well, that's right, Tony. And it does take courage to, I've found it takes courage for people even simply to sit down with and have conversation with people you disagree with. How much, Tony, how much of this is, you think, how much of a problem is it that we just don't understand kind of where people who disagree with us are coming from? Like, we just don't understand why they think the way they do. And we need to figure that, we need to do that first. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and to do that, we sort of need to put our judgment aside. Like, we judge
Good.
the ideas.
Yeah.
We judge the ideas, but we never judge the human being.
Yeah.
And we don't know what circumstances have led them to believe what they believe. But we always should strive to have compassion for the human being. And what we learned when I was at Life After Hate is it's sitting down and listening to someone. And people across from us had I know the radical ideas they had in their head.
Yeah.
But when you know their childhood history, you understand how they got there.
Yep.
And you don't judge them. You judge the activity. But listening to those ideas, there's a tension we have to hold. It doesn't mean we accept the ideas, but and so we listen to it with non-judgment. At the same time, we don't give up any of our values. We don't acquiesce our values in order to make nice in the conversation.
Yeah.
We hold our values and hold our non-judgment space at the same time. And there's an expression our old executive director had, and it's never concede, never condemn.
Yeah. 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 Well, very well put. Hey, 2 more for you. And again, I think this is a real difficult time. I think we are divided, especially politically. There is extremism. There is polarization. And I'll be honest, Tony, I'm a dark Irishman. There are times where I kind of lose hope, and I really wonder if we can overcome this. How hopeful are you that we can make progress against extremism and polarization?
I'm quite hopeful.
Good.
Quite hopeful, but it's not going to happen from inside our comfort zones.
Yep.
Gone is the time we have left to make a change from a place of comfort. Again, we have to step out and be courageous in our actions, and courageous to be counted where we need to be counted.
Yeah.
I've seen incredible transformations in young men and women, and I've seen those young men and women go on to create further transformations in societies when they go back in the spirit of reconciliation and repair, and with an open heart. I spent 15 years in that world, and I know I put a lot of evil into the world. And what I learned, which is very important, and if your listeners can get this, it's very empowering. I spent 15 years trying to make myself more powerful by changing the world outside of me. Yeah. And what I realized, I have more power to change the world when I change who I am in the world. When we change who we are in the world and sort of inspire, be like a beacon to others, we have an incredible power to transform than if we are trying to rail against and change the world outside of us. And if more people can adopt that, I change who I am in the world to change the world outside of me, that's a very powerful secret weapon that the other side doesn't have.
Very, 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 very well said. As we close, tell me about the film you've got out there now, The Cure for Hate, Bearing Witness from Auschwitz.
So I used to be a Holocaust denier and neo-Nazi and all of that. And in 2018, I went to Auschwitz and spent 15 hours over 2 days with a guide who had lost family there relatives herself, and it's quite a powerful film. And part of the reason we made it is the recent survey: 66% of millennials and 41% of adults can't say what Auschwitz was.
Wow.
And as the last of the Holocaust survivors is going to pass from this world, that the memory of those events will no longer be in living memory.
Yeah.
So we sort of tie the rise of Nazi Germany to certain themes that are going on in the world today and in this country. And so we wanted to create something to use my story as a platform to make it relevant to young people today. So we tell the story of Auschwitz, but we bring it to the present, make it relevant to young people today so that it doesn't get forgotten and those mistakes don't get repeated. And it's also part of my reparation and repair and reconciliation with the Jewish people who they were the ones that I harmed the most for my activities. So,
amen, brother. Man, that's just I can't wait to get my hands on that. It's called The Cure for Hate: Bearing Witness from Auschwitz. Again, Tony's book is The Cure for Hate. Highly recommended to everybody. Follow this guy. He is an inspiration in a world that needs a lot more inspiration. Tony McAleer. Tony, thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you very much.
You got it.
Thank you for listening. Remember to listen, share, and follow White Flag with Joe Walsh on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere great podcasts are found. And be sure to leave a 5-star review. This has been White Flag with Joe Walsh.